Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 11th of February. And joining me on this edition are Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
There is no spoon.
Tech Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Never send a human to do a machine's job.
Games Editor Mark Botwright.
Really good noodles.
And Audio Reviewer Edward Seley.
I know this steak doesn't exist.
Welcome. Edward.
My mother.
Yes, I am the fire starter, twisted fire starter. Where are we? We're back on the podcast. That's where we are. Been listening to Tidal, Ed, and Mark. This will appeal to you. Dance to the 90s playlist. You won't remember the 90s in terms of what you did, but you will remember the music.
Yeah, some vague recollections going on there, I think.
If we're doing bizarre plugs on Tidal, do check out I think it's on Spotify as well, the John Carpenter solo album. Yes, it exists, as in director John Carpenter.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. There's going to be a extremely long review of it coming out quite soon. Ed, courtesy of Chris McAnee. I listened to after you pointed it out to me. I listened to it on Tidal whilst proofing the article, and it's very good.
It needs to be very loud.
I like Tidal a lot, actually.
Yes, but we need to point out that there are
other
streaming services available. Right, okay. I think Mr. Botwright did it last week, so Hodge, your turn. Latest competitions.
Yep, I've read it this time. Okay, ending first and probably of highest monetary value is the Yamaha SRT 1000 soundstage. I believe that ends on the 16th, is that right? Following that, we've got the Devolo D-LAN 650 Plus Powerline kit. So that's 3 home plugs in the box. Greg reviewed that and liked it, gave it a recommended badge. I think that's worth about 120 quid. And then we've got various Blu-rays, beginning with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I've not seen. Any good? Anyone?
It's jolly good.
It's very good.
Really?
If you like realistic spy films.
Weak adaptation.
Yeah, I do. Oh, difference of opinion at 10 to 1.
A novel into a film, so it's going to be easy, I think.
Willow, which I have seen, but I can't remember much about. It's from the 80s.
10.
Yeah. I think to remember, I thought it was okay. Can't really remember much about that one. And the Mad Max trilogy.
Well, it was better than Howard did Duck. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So the Mad Max trilogy,
too short.
Mad Max trilogy. Watch the first 2 and use the third one as a useful coaster for your drink whilst you're watching the other 2. So
and so say all of us. And that one closes. I don't know. Can't see it.
We'll be plugging that one for weeks. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, we're plugging that for weeks. Don't worry about that one.
Is there a parrot in the room?
An echo.
Right, so we are getting into a new product season. Manufacturers starting to get their new products ready for launch. Usually starts round about March. So we've had a couple of launch events in the UK for a UK product. The first one was Sony launching their new 2015 TV lineup. Steve, you went along to Sony HQ to witness this. What did you witness?
Well, in terms of the technology, I didn't actually witness much more than we saw at CES. In fact, I'd say in certain respects, I saw a bit less than we saw at CES because they didn't have a lot of the demos actually running because the TVs are still very new, pre-production models. None of them were on, for example, in any of the sort of displays. They're all just big black mirrors, basically. But we had a look at some of the technology involved, and they obviously went through it in more detail in terms of presentation. In terms of the lineup, though, it's the usual Sony confusion of loads of different model numbers, all of which in fact seem very similar to the ones from last year, which doesn't really help. But basically, they've got their flagship, which is going to be the X94C, and that is the big 75-inch. That's the big 75-inch model. Then they've got the X93C, which will be in 55 and 65-inch models. Now, the only difference between these two is that the 94 has what's called their Extended Dynamic Range Pro. So in other words, it's got full backlight array with local dimming. And the 93 only has an Extended Dynamic Range, so it hasn't got the full backlight. But otherwise, they're all pretty those two are pretty impressive. They've got a slightly revised design in terms of the speakers. So they're using magnetic fluid speakers for both the woofer and the tweeter. sorry, for the woofer and the subwoofer, and so they've made it slightly narrower. They can get more sound out of less physical space, basically, which means they aren't quite as bulky, and the taper doesn't go all the way from the top down to the bottom. It's not as wedge shaped as it was last year. It still is a bit wedge shaped, but not as wedge shaped. So it's not quite as big or heavy, which is probably good news if anyone's ever seen the 6 or tried to move the 65-inch from last year. It nearly killed me. Again, emphasis on good sound quality. I agree that with people who've pointed out that why don't they make a model without the speakers because I don't want them. Very valid point. I guess it's something to do with production lines and economies of scale, but you'd think, you're spending good money on a big TV, you're probably going to have some sort of sound system already in place. But anyway, I like the fact that Sony's trying to improve the sound quality. It's a good thing. The fact it's got things like you can be used with a wireless sub is good news as well. But I think maybe they should give people the choice, because that way, if you need the speakers built in, great. And if you don't, then why pay for something you're never going to use? So I'm guessing they're not cheap. Obviously, in terms of pricing for any of their products that they showed us, there's no pricing yet, but they will start hitting the shops in April, with some of the bigger models hitting in July.
Okay, they really need to change their model structure, numbering structure, because unless it says C on the end, people, you're not buying this year's model.
Yes, basically that's it. Make sure if you want to buy this year's model, make sure there's a C as a suffix. Otherwise, you could be buying last year's model, basically.
Which was B.
I don't know if that's deliberate to try and get people to buy old models, or whether they just can't be bothered to think up any new numbers.
It's really annoying, and I wish they would change it. I really do. Why not have a numbered system that goes up in tens? Every year you add another 10 to the model number. Something nice and simple like that.
It works for Samsung, but they do it as a prefix, don't they? So
yeah, they got a prefix, yeah.
So people seem to understand the prefix, but not the suffix. I think Sony just trying to be different.
Who wants to take a bet on whether they'll be using G this year?
Who? Samsung.
Well,
they won't be going back. Well, they skipped G last year, didn't they? They skipped G. They skipped it.
Hang on, they're on H. They were on H last year.
Yeah, so they went from F to H, so they skipped G.
Yeah, learn your alphabet, Steve.
They skipped G, H.
This week's podcast was brought to you by the letter G.
Yeah, they're on F. They're on H, aren't they? Not F.
Yeah. So it might be I, Steve.
No, what I was thinking is, are they going to avoid L as well?
Yeah, well, they definitely avoided G because it was G. All LG's products are G, this and that, and definitely. They told
so presumably, yeah, it'll be. I don't know. But I wonder if they'll use I, because I is kind of wishy-washy.
It's a bit Apple as well, isn't it?
Mm.
I think it would be J.
Could be a J. Go for the J.
Yeah, I reckon it's J. Place your bets.
Anyway, the Sony stuff, I've got to say, in terms of picture quality, I thought it looked pretty good. I mean, what limited picture quality I managed to get a look at. But they went through the technology involved, and their X-Reality, called the X1 chipset, which is basically like a gatekeeper. It controls all the functions within the TV. That looked quite impressive. And that's basically controlling things like the X-Reality Pro processing chip, which does either upscale to 4K or it scales, or it not scales, but it processes 4K content as well. They've also got their troluminous panels with a wider color gamut and an extended dynamic range with a wider dynamic range. Although these are not HDR TVs, I should stress that. None of the ones that I saw are compatible with HDR, although they did say they are working on an HDR TV for later in the year. So read that what you will.
Sorry, Steve, as soon as you said gatekeeper, I was off for Bill Murray with
Keymaster and gatekeeper.
Right, so that's Sony. It looks interesting. I quite like the look of the Slimline S.
Yeah, that's the X90C, and that's unbelievably thin. I mean, like 4 millimeters for most of the length of the panel. Obviously, at the bottom, that's where the electronics and the connections and the speakers are. But for most of the panel, it's really thin, and it's designed. You can mount it completely flush against the wall. Comes with a sort of a U-bend bracket that you just hook on. And
a U-bend bracket.
That's don't blame me.
You really should work in marketing.
It's what you call it. That's the 90C, and there's also the S85C, which is this year's curved panel. So there will be one curved panel as well available in the UK. It's a good solid lineup. What panels they're using, I don't know. They didn't have the TVs on, so I couldn't tell. They wouldn't tell us. So whether they're IPS or VA, I'm guessing there'll be as with last year and previous years, there'll be a combination depending on models and screen sizes and where they sourced them from in the first place. But certainly they've got the usual Sony looks. They're using Android TV now, which I've got to say, it's a sensible idea. Outsource a lot of this smart stuff to somebody else in the same way that you outsource the panel production. Why not? So I think they have quite an interesting. I mean, I think Mark will probably back me up here. their previous platforms have been a bit rubbish.
Not so much rubbish, it's just hard to get around.
Yeah, bit bitty.
Typical Sony UIs, which are rubbish and awful to understand. Of course, the Sonys have got UView as well, haven't they? This time around in the UK.
They will. Oh well, I was going to get to that. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's fragmented as they have been in the past. They're using Android TV as the primary smart system, which is good, and they will be in the summer adding UView, which means that they'll be able to offer all of the catch-up services on their TVs now. Up until recently, up until Panasonic did free time last year, the only manufacturer who could claim that was Samsung. But now Sony will also be able to offer all the catch-up services via UView. Now that will be on a separate app, if you like, which is strange because it basically means you could have sort of 3 different ways of accessing TV guides, which could get a bit confusing for some users. So I guess they need to sort of make sure it's integrated as effectively as possible and as simple to use, because that's really the key now. I think looking at all the smart platforms that we've seen at CES, the emphasis is very much on simplicity and integration into the TV itself and navigation, and those are the key areas. And certainly looking at Android TV, it looks very good.
Right, so we've mentioned them a couple of times now, but Samsung also had the unveiling of their TV line, Mark, for Europe, and obviously we're assuming at the minute the UK as well. So Samsung had held their forum. They do this every year. It was at Monaco this year, and what did they announce? Just
the stuff they showed at CES. Really, there wasn't much extension on that. Emphasis was on. Oh, it is J. Look, sorry, I did. The model numbers will begin with J this year. Who
wins the sweepstakes?
That was me. I should have known, considering I published this story, putting all the bloody model numbers in it. The focus was on the SUHD TV lineup, which is the HDR compatible stuff. 3 models: JS9500, JS9000, and JS8500 will make up that range, ranging from 48 to 88 inches, to suit all living rooms. All be running Tizen, the Samsung's open source.
Yeah, it's Tizen and not Tizer.
It's not Tizer, Steve. Tizen.
Sorry about that. Bill, you put it into my head.
Yeah, and then they all look great. I mean, they showed nothing they didn't show at CES, to be fair. And
I've got to say, closed door demo of the prototypes at CES running HDR material, pretty jaw dropping, wasn't it, Steve? It just looked absolutely gorgeous. Really did.
Yeah, so I'd recommend checking out that video on the site, because that will give you a better idea of what to expect. And
and if you want to hear a high-end home cinema speaker system, then give me a ring and I'll let you.
No, it still looks good on the videos, doesn't it? Come on, joking apart, it still looks very good.
Yes, it looks okay on the video, but actually seeing it in person, I mean, the thing for me, I don't know if you picked up on it, Steve, but the new gamma curve, because it's bringing out a little bit more in the shadow detail, it just adds so much more detail to the image.
I think, it did. It was. I mean, obviously, I think we should probably caveat this by saying that they were using specially mastered content that Exodus, wasn't it? They were showing, and also they had Life of Pi. As well, but they to be mastered in HDR and with a wider color gamut and using slightly different gamma. You kind of, they did look amazing, but it does. I think what impressed me was that it shows you what TVs could be capable of if they can just get their act together and get the content mastered in with a better standard set of standards and get it to the consumer somehow. Then the future's looking, no pun intended, very bright right now for TV generally. And I think last year when Samsung were talking about not necessarily needing OLED, maybe there was more life in LCD. Yeah, I kind of thought, you're just talking your game because you haven't got any OLEDs to sell. But I had to eat my words a little bit when we were at CES because I thought this looked really, really impressive.
Yeah. So this week we should be getting a closer look at these TVs. Yeah. So tune into the podcast next week for more on Samsung stuff. So let's move on. Annual rumours of Apple planning to enter the web TV business. Like that headline says, it's annual. It happens all the time. Usually in the run-up to what they're going to announce this year. Again, Mark, this is not a TV as in a physical TV, but web TV as in a portal.
Yeah, they want to reinvent how people watch TV. and interact with their televisions. So, I mean, there will be a hardware device to back it up. And of course, I think there'll be a new Apple TV if this happens. It's a big if, because as we've said, it must be the third year in the row we've tried, this story has tried out at pretty much the same time of the year. That Apple are in talks with various TV execs with a view to launching a web TV service that would aggregate lots of their content that Apple would sell on, presumably at quite a high cost as a monthly subscription. So it's not altogether clear, of course, because this is all rumour of how it will work, but it's probably something like the Sling TV that's just launched in the US, where there's a number of networks who provide an amount of content that Apple that they're allowed to sell on. So the way I envisage it would be, and I can't see it working in the UK for various reasons, but because of all the free TV stuff, but so you could possibly subscribe to ESPN Sport, HBO Plus or whatever, and pay, you know, a set monthly fee on the packages that you want to actually see.
You see, I don't think that's how they would approach it. I don't think that's how they would do it. I think that's basing it on an existing model. I think if you're looking at Apple have to do it completely different to everybody else, whether it's just reinventing the wheel or whatever, but they will present it in a completely different way to that. I don't know what the answer is, because I don't know.
Well, it could be things like maybe sports or crime TV or genres. They could sell genre packages, or I don't know. It's hard to envisage exactly what they want to do.
I think the strength is that Apple have huge funding behind them. They have a huge bank account. They have enough money to take a gamble on something like this, and that will attract TV businesses. That will attract content providers. You would have thought. To the Apple service, because if there's one thing that Apple can do is sell product, and if they have a good product to sell and it has the right content on there, and you want to be a content partner, there's an opportunity there for them to do something different. What that is, I don't think it's along the lines of existing models, because why would you bother? Because everybody else has it covered, basically.
On a wider level, though, why would they bother? Full stop. They are successful,
world domination,
and is it honestly worth the effort and outlay? I mean, you know, is anyone else absolutely? I mean, I suppose they have to look at, you know, we haven't mentioned Netflix for a while. We need to, I suppose, are they the most lucrative of these platforms? And is it actually a sum of money that would make any difference at all to Cupertino?
You see, I think that's, again, maybe missing the point, because I think the point is to shift product, not necessarily to shift iTunes or to shift anything else. It's to shift
product. But then still the omens aren't great, because in a lineup of otherwise almost infinitely successful product, Apple TVs have never hit the mark. I think it's one of the worst systems out there. The Apple TV. I
sold a lot of them. Right?
I spent £90 on one. I hardly use it. I use Morocco 3 because I get more of what I want, and it's more UK centric.
But isn't the idea that they're trying to kind of take it away from the idea of just kind of browsing content? They're not just going to get a huge amount of content, dump it there and say, we've bought this up. If they can get their kind of predictive algorithms in place. Yeah, well,
they bought Matcha, which is exactly that, yeah.
Exactly. If they can kind of prove to the companies making content that they can sell it and they can push people towards it without people just kind of generally going through and seeing for similar series, that kind of thing. If they can prove that works, there's a huge amount of money to be made there.
I mean, one of the problems with web TV in general is too much choice. And when you present people with too much choice, they end up making no choice whatsoever. But if you're more focused on what you're offering people in terms of targeting the right thing that they're going to watch, rather than giving them 100 different films that they might want to watch, you're more likely to get engagement there, I think. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's the way they have to do it differently to how everybody else is doing it at the minute.
The problem is, if they want people to sign up for it, and should we say they're driving a hard bargain, they have to show that it works first, and they're not going to get the content. They're not going to show that it works without having the content first and having already signed it all up. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation with them.
Well, the fact it's been going on so long shows you how difficult it is to get these deals, I think.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's not like a music business. You have so many owners of content when it comes to TV and especially film. I mean, look at Blade Runner. I mean, that took nearly 20 years, Steve, for it to get onto DVD because there were so many rights issues with it.
Yeah, you're right, Phil. I mean, the legal complexities of any film production deal, particularly on independent features, tends to be the case that, they often have different regions. So you would sell distribution in different regions separately, which happens to a lot of smaller studios. Then you've got just various different production deals behind the scenes. Also, things like music rights within the film. It doesn't always apply to all media. So it can be incredibly complicated. And I think Apple's discovering that. I mean, there was talk when Steve Jobs died about, an Apple TV as in an actual television made by Apple. And I think they quickly realized that was all, there's no money in it. It's incredibly complicated to make something that's actually classed as a TV because it has to have a tuner in it. And then you've got different regions, etc. And then they quickly realized it wasn't worth the trouble. What they're probably looking at now is just delivering their own platform over either someone else's television or through a device like Apple TV or Roku.
Yeah, I mean, the future is streaming. I don't think there's any
question
doubt.
about that now.
I don't think there's any question about that. And it's something that we're going to move on to when we come to the movie section a bit later on. But a lot of these in-house productions by companies like Amazon Prime and Netflix are actually starting to win awards, which shows you the power of streaming content at the minute. So I think this story keeps coming back, Mark, and maybe you can correct me on this, because I think Tim turned around and said, the one area of the market that needs to change is how we interact with the TV. And I think since he said that, everybody's jumped on that to say, oh, they're making a TV or they're going to make web TV.
Oh, it's not just that; it's the purchases they've made. They bought companies that relate to smart TV technology as well. So I think that there's a little bit of that adds to the fire. But I think it's a long way off. I think I can't see this, definitely not this year, maybe the year after, more like the year after that if it's going to happen. There's just so much that has to fall into place. I'd be interested to see it, that's for sure, but I just get the feeling it'll be expensive.
No, I was just wondering, so if it perhaps wasn't some kind of a streaming service themselves, but what if it was some way to utilize, your iDevice with the predictive algorithm? So, almost like a kind of universal remote app or something like that worked with other streaming services.
Again, that's what Matcher was. It sort of integrated Prime, Netflix, iTunes, various, streaming services, aggregated their content and sort of pulled it all together. And I think that's just probably part of what they'll offer them. They'll do that with live TV as well, so it'll be on demand and live stuff. So yeah, I mean it's relatively exciting, but we don't really know enough.
Love them or hate them, usually you end up liking what Apple come up with. They just have this knack of being very clever about how they approach different markets. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But like you say, it will be interesting to see what happens with that. Now, before we move on, here's a little question. Knowing what we know, talking to the people that we talk to within the industry and so on, and without getting anybody into trouble, so no names, no companies, anything like that. But if I was to say to you, how long do you think it'll be before we get day-and-day release of cinema movies in the home? How long do you think that is away? I'm going to go to Steve first.
Well, it's already been experimented with, but on a proper wide scale, I don't think we're that far away from it now. I think with the changes in TV standards, I think in a few years you could see the opportunity of actually watching day-and-day release movies in the same standard as you can see them at the cinema at home.
Right. So if I was to say to you, Steve, you can have this facility, but it's £30 for a one-off viewing, but you can see it the same day as it's released at the cinema in your own home cinema, would you go with that?
Probably not, because it's fairly easy for me to get to the cinema. But if you're in a situation where there's, say, a family of four, or you've got a young kid or baby even, and you can't get out, Ed, for example, would like to go to the cinema but can never get away to the cinema, and it was a price where it was comparable to what he and Kirsty would pay to go to the movies together for an evening, when you price in things like parking and petrol and food and whatever, then yes, I can see that appealing.
Okay,
Not
so
to me personally, though. So
Ed, does that appeal?
£30, one time only.
Yeah, but you're seeing it the same day as it's released at the cinema.
I suppose, when I think about it, there are one or two films I can think of in the next 12 to 18 months where I'd at least consider it. Yes. Presumably, when you say day of release, I can choose any start time of my choosing on that day.
Yeah. It's made available to you at the same time as it's made available in the cinema.
Yeah, I consider it. I mean, in terms of the second question about timeline for it, such as the risks that film companies are taking with oversaturation of blockbusters, it's going to happen much sooner than we think, because someone's going to get very cold feet about losing an enormous amount of money and bet the farm on allowing for more people to view it straight off.
I mean, the reason this one popped in my head recently was because of the interview. It's at the cinema release in the UK, but if you're US or you use Unblock Us, you could have watched that already on Netflix in the US because they didn't release it in theatres, obviously because of the whole Sony hack thing. But interesting to see how much money it did make, even though it didn't have a theatrical run, Steve.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I watched it on Netflix a couple of weeks ago, and that's a good example where they obviously, Sony, in an attempt to recoup as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, pass it on to Netflix after a very, very limited theatrical release in the States. I mean, it comes out on Blu-ray, I think, this week in the States as well. So they're moving out quickly. I think it makes sense. Ultimately, when you're investing such large sums of money, I'm not talking about the interview here, but general summer blockbusters, the quicker you can get that money back in again, the less interest you're paying, and the better it is for the company or the studio in general. And already the window between a theatrical release and a home video release is getting smaller and smaller. It's about 3 months now, sometimes shorter depending on the film. If the film bombs at the cinema, they usually get it out on disc as quickly as possible because they want to recoup their money as quickly as possible, as much as they can. The only reason they don't have even shorter windows than that is because the cinema chains moan about it for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's inevitable that we're moving towards a day and date release. So you've got a choice of going to the cinema or watching it at home. I've got a home cinema, so from that perspective, it would make sense to just watch them at home if I could. I think 30 quid's a bit toppy, but 20 quid, and we're in the ballpark, because then it's 2 people go to the movies. That's 20 quid. I haven't got to bother getting in the car. I haven't got to leave the house if it's a cold evening. Just watch it in a nice cup of no people annoying me, no noises from crowds.
Or if you're like Ed, you just don't like people in general.
Yes.
So as a person. On an individual level, a person is fine. People are stupid.
Okay, before we get into any more trouble, Mr. Botwright, if we go this way, and if the studios went this way, it would kill piracy overnight, would it not?
No. No, there's no way really to kill piracy. You can only kind of lessen it, dampen it to a certain extent. I can't really see the situation where this happens, kind of becomes widespread, simply because there's the idea of this kind of huge marketing machine, that the kind of window for a film to make an impact would be so diminished that the kind of publicity that something like The Interview got, or bad publicity, but all publicity is good publicity. Most films won't get that. You would have to kind of concentrate your marketing so focused in such a small period of time. I just think it would be kind of almost impossible to carry that across all the studios.
There's also the concern. I mean, it offers, as you say, for films that haven't been desperately that they're worried about, it offers a scope of of pulling back costs. But you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because it's undoubtedly going to hit back on home sales later on as well. Because if let's face it, if it's crap, most people won't bother with then doing anything further with it. You'll have done a one-time only sale, and that's it.
But isn't that already the case? Because people are just streaming content anyway and watching it on iTunes or whatever. So you kind of already reached that point as far as home video is concerned. It's less and less about buying something to watch over and over again. It's about sort of consuming that content as quickly as possible. I should imagine, for example, that this weekend Jupiter Ascending opened up in the States and it bombed, right? It made like 19 million off a budget of 170 million. Right now, Warner Bros. Wishing they could get that out and to recoup as much money as possible, as fast as possible, and just shove it out into the home video market rather than wasting time in the cinema. But they're going to have to wait 3 months before they can do that.
But don't you think, though, that 3 months kind of helps them in a sense?
No, because more stuff's come out, people just forget. I mean, people will have forgotten Jupiter Ascending in 2 weeks.
But you get a
So-
second chance. You get the chance, though, to tie it in with something that might be coming up around the same time. You know, you see it a lot with kind of like sci-fi films. One tends to slightly piggyback off another. If a film bombs and it's bad at the cinema, no one's then saying, actually, 20 quid, I'll watch that on my TV.
Well, that's it. It comes down to pricing, and that's one of the reasons why it won't necessarily stop pirating, because if it's still too expensive compared to buying a pirate disc or watching it on Pirate Bay for nothing.
Other
the studios
piracy
are gonna-
websites are available.
That's the problem they're facing.
Steve, are you all right? Do you need a bottle of oxygen or something? Or are you okay?
Sorry, I was trying not to
So
swallow
you're
some.
now
allergic
finding
to
out that you are in
cats?
fact hilariously allergic to cats.
His face is swelling up like a pumpkin right now.
I swallowed some air. I can breathe for a second then.
Swallow some air.
Yeah.
Okay.
The AV Forum said, don't look to us for tips on health and fitness.
Don't swallow air,
whatever
kids.
you do.
Yeah, do not swallow air, whatever you do.
The upshot was I was going to belch really loud. I try not to do that.
Oh, splendid. The gift that keeps on giving.
Right, so just to wrap up on this one, and like I say, it just popped in the head. I think it's an interesting way of looking at the market. Personally, I don't think it would work. I think the only way you could convince the studios to do it would be to charge ridiculous sums of money, because the first thing that would happen would be cinema chains would start suing them to do that. So I don't see it happening personally, but interesting.
Well, yeah, it depends on the cinema chains. It's going to depend on the economic side, whether it makes sense for the studios to do it anyway. But we kind of, over the last 20 years, we've moved closer and closer to that inevitability, haven't we?
Yeah.
It should be said
People
that-
have experimented with it.
Sorry, but it should be said there is a kind of section of the public who will pay over the odds
Already happens.
just for convenience, because we see this with regards downloadable games all the time. A game gets released, it's in your supermarket that you're probably no more than 3 or 4 miles away, and they're running it as a loss leader for £40, or you can download it on your console for £60. And companies like EA make a huge amount of money from those, just from people who just say, well, for convenience, I've got that extra money, I may as well just download it.
Well, it's like people that buy ready-made mashed potato. It's not just games.
It's just like
not
that.
Media. There are certain things where it staggers me that you will pay the premium for someone else to carry out a notionally simple task.
So
it's exactly the same thing.
So the answer is smash, basically.
No, the answer is peel your own sodding potatoes.
Well, studios have started to offer films on streaming services a couple of weeks before the discs come out as well. So they kind of, I think that's an effort to try and push people more towards a streaming future. But if you remember 2 years ago, the Ben Wheatley film, A Field in England, had a multi-platform release. So it was shown on Channel 4. I mean, it's a site because it was also shown on Channel 4 or Film 4 that night. But it came out at the cinema and on streaming services and on DVD and on Blu-ray all on the same day. And apparently, it sold quite well on disc and everything. People still bought the disc. People wanted the Blu-ray, wanted the better quality, wanted to keep it. It didn't actually necessarily stop it from made money at the cinema too. But for people that couldn't get to the cinema, or it was only showing in cinemas that are a long way away, they had alternative options. And I think, that makes sense.
Yeah. And if you're worth a few quid, you can do this anyway, because the likelihood is that you have a very high spec home cinema with a professional projector where you can speak to a film distributor and have the film delivered to your projector, inserted, watch it once, but you pay a fortune for it.
Yeah,
But
it's like
there are
300 quid or something like that.
Yeah, but there are people who have that facility right now. So it's maybe a little bit away yet, but be
Yeah. If
interesting.
you're David Beckham, you're not queuing up at the local Cineworld, are you? You're going to be doing that.
No, you've got a nice barcode projector where you just slide the hard disk in, press a couple of buttons, select your
Well, he
pin
doesn't do
number.
that. He pays some minion to do that. for him,
Yes,
so-
of course he does, yeah.
What, he's actually got a little yellow egg-shaped thing.
I really, really hope he has. That would be brilliant.
Right, so just to wrap up on hardware, upcoming reviews, we got the Sony SRS X7 wireless speaker. Who's doing that?
Me. It's
You lucky boy.
it's all right. It's good. It's good.
I saw that the other day in the shop. It's enormous, isn't it?
Oh, not that one. No, that's the
Oh,
other thing
no.
I was talking about. No, I can't remember what that one's called, but that bloody thing is huge. Yeah, it's a bit bigger than the pictures on the internet would have you believe. But yeah, I've not started on that one particularly. I've not got my hip hop mat out. I've just got to work on a few moves.
Throw some serious shapes.
Yeah, I need to limber up for that one. The other one's a bit more sedate. It's just a normal wireless speaker, Bluetooth, DLA, PMP. Does a lot. Integrates with loads of apps. Very, very good.
So this is the beatbox thing, is it?
No, that's not the beatbox.
All right, okay. Because I think the beatbox,
just a modest wireless speaker.
I think the beatbox is definitely our audience. Do you not think? You know, people
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
late
flashing
30s,
lights.
40s,
It's got
flashing
lights,
lights,
everything.
disco.
Missing a cassette deck.
Has it got a graphic equalizer? That would be awesome.
Yeah, there is a graphic equalizer.
Are we starting our own crew here?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think any of us are physically fit enough to carry this thing
Yeah,
around.
we'll-
from
No,
place-
it's really light. It's
Make
a
it
lot
through the
lighter
early
than
rounds
it
on Britain's Got Talent.
looks. It's very
Yeah,
light. You can stand it on its end if you
Yeah,
want.
the word massive would be would be different terms when it comes to us. The AVForums massive. Yes, they are.
Massive waistline. Yeah, so that's it. And the beatbox will be next week.
At least we'd be able to bounce well, wouldn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I've got images of Withers with a cap on backwards. It's big beatbox.
Give it a laugh.
No, it'd be you, Ed, wouldn't it? You're more that age. Are you not? Are you not a b-boy?
Not really, what? No, what? Like Chris Cross wearing my trousers on back to front? No,
It's my age. It's our age group, Phil, really.
Is it b-boy? B-boy, and was it body popping and breakdancing and Grandmaster Flash and Africa Bambata?
I was into all that.
According to Back to the Future, I'm supposed to be wearing our trousers inside out in 2015.
I might be.
Hang on. Mark, have you dressed yet today?
No.
They're not wearing any trousers.
No, I'm dressed. I'm clothed, but I wouldn't leave the house looking like this. Let's put it that way. I've got a tartan lounge pants on, an old hoodie, and unmatching socks. I look really good.
Okay, I think we better go to games news. Okay, time for games news and another rumour going around. This time, Nintendo might be making a live-action Zelda series, Mark.
Yes, might being the operative word there. Very much in the early stages. This a rumour from the Wall Street Journal makes it sound a little bit like it's kind of the Watergate scandal or something. You know, they've got a source says that Netflix is describing it as Game of Thrones for a family audience.
Which means it's
Sounds really rubbish.
all the good stuff gone.
Which means it's not Game of Thrones then. You know, it's obviously sounding mad, and it's one of those things that will probably just kind of, you know, disappear into the ether, and no one will ever hear of it anymore. I mean, there's apparently no writer attached to this stage, but it's Netflix who have had some success, obviously, with original content, and Halo Nightfall, the original series for Xbox Live, certainly seemed to strike a chord with a lot of fans of that franchise. So, you know, perhaps it's indicative of a slight kind of changing of attitudes from Nintendo towards, you know, this kind of technology.
They've
Or it
just
could
launched
just-
in Japan, though, haven't they? Netflix has.
Yeah.
Always
Or
going
it could-
to launch in Japan.
Could just be Netflix being kind of, you know, opportunistic and trying to find something that will, you know, resonate with a particular audience. But I'd watch it.
Well, to be honest, you'd probably watch it if it had the same production values as Button Moon. I don't know if you're necessarily the person to judge. I think you may be in a bit deep on the whole Zelda thing, Mark.
Perhaps. I'm pleading the fifth.
Mark probably wants to get a bit deep on the whole Zelda thing, which is a bit worrying.
Oh, shut up! You always bring it down. And when actually, I got really confused when I saw this in the running order, and I assumed, mainly because I wasn't paying attention, I'm quite sleep deprived, that when you said live action version, that it was going to be like the Philips CD Vision games from the 80s. I thought, well, I suppose if anyone could pull it off, but yeah. But hang on, hasn't there already been a terrible version of Zelda that was ported out from Nintendo to the live action version?
You know what? I don't know.
Hold on.
If there
To
was,
the
Mark would
internet.
know, surely.
Nintendo Philips CDI.
I
Yeah,
used
here
to
we
have a
go.
life.
Yeah, there's the Legend of Zelda series at CDI games.
I never owned a CDI.
Well, I don't think you missed out,
To
if
eat
I'm
bake.
completely honest.
eBay. I'll never forget the demo I had of a CDI system where it was the beginning of Star Trek 5? Is that the one where they're in the prison?
No, that's you're thinking of 6. I
6,
think.
is it? Right.
Well, they get locked up for murder or something, don't they? Bones and
Bones and Shatner, yeah. Anyway, and it was that scene where they're going to the prison and they're walking through the snow and it's snowing and all the rest of it, and the compression was so bad. You couldn't make out who was who and what was going on. It was just blocks of white everywhere. It was terrible.
But that was the future at one point.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, VCD. That was the way to go.
It was right next to Laserdisc as well. And you know what? I bought the Laserdisc player.
I wonder which would be worth more now.
Laserdisc, I would imagine.
Right.
The
Laserdisc has some residual value. The CDI has no residual value. There's a tiny number of Laserdisc players which are worth big money, and everything else is just landfill, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll never forgive Steve for selling his one, because I would have had that in a heartbeat. And
did you have one of the Elites, Steve?
Yes, I did.
Did it have wooden side cheeks?
Yep.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
It was a thing of pure beauty. I don't know why I sold it.
I've got a 919, but that doesn't have wooden side cheeks. But it is a magnificent gold colour.
So, Mark, does the new Nintendo 3DS have wooden side cheeks?
No, unfortunately. I used to have an Atari 2600 which had the wooden frame. Yeah, that was fantastic.
You can actually buy that for your PS4 now, can't you? Like a wooden frame that goes round about it just for nostalgia.
And rightly so.
There's not enough wood being used in electronics these days, is there?
Yeah, there's not enough wood in electronics, yeah.
AVForums, the cutting edge. Panel it.
You'll get splinters.
Do you want me to go on to about the 3D?
Yes, please. Save us, please.
Hopefully review should be up by the time this poddy goes up. It's pretty much as you'd expect for, Nintendo have got this history of revising consoles and adding bits and kind of, never really messing too much with the overall design when it's just a general update. But the big selling point of this one is, obviously, it's got this C-stick, which is a little analog nub for camera control.
Stop using the word nub, it just sounds wrong.
All right, an analog teat. It takes a little while to get used to, simply because anyone who's generally played consoles and is used to using 2 analog sticks, to have something that's kind of asymmetrical just seems a little bit strange to start with. It doesn't fully kind of replace the idea of a secondary stick for camera control, because you do get used to the idea of where your thumb is placed is where you're kind of used to seeing where the screen will be. This, though, once you're acclimatized to it, it makes all the difference in the Majora's Mask, the game that hopefully review should be up as well by the time this podcast goes out. But also the big selling point is the stable 3D, which basically means that the 3D on the 3DS now finally works. It was always an odd choice to release a console with 3D effect, a stereoscopic 3D effect that broke if you moved your head off axis in any way. So you had to be staring straight at it, when the console itself had, motion controls. You could use a little gyroscope and move about like that. So obviously the 3D effect was always breaking. With this new 3DS, it's very, very stable, and I've always tended to turn it off for anything that where it wasn't too necessary. Now I've got to say I'm going back to a few old games, and stuff like Pilot Wings looks fantastic on it.
Solid.
Sounds good.
Word.
Fresh.
Oh yeah, you know what we should call ourselves?
What's that?
Groove Matrix, which was the name of Anton Deck's band in Biker Grove.
Oh, we
Not
can't have it then, can we?
Testicular Sound Express, Peter Griffin's one from Family Guy. Or indeed Electric Boogaloo.
Breakdance 2.
Breakdance 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
Isn't that still one of the worst films ever made?
It's up there with Weekend at Bernie's 2 and not being that good.
Oh, the other one that always gives me memories of my childhood was Beat Street. I don't know if you ever saw that. Acting was
Rings a bell.
freaking terrible.
I'll plug the games podcast and we'll move on. that tumbleweed again.
Yes, Games podcast should go up on the 14th. Fingers crossed. Obviously, we haven't. I don't think we've had a potty since.
Yet, have you?
we haven't had a potty since the Windows 10 announcement. So that's probably going to feature stuff like HoloLens, also Battlefield Hardline beta, and probably get onto Halo 5 and the beta feedback from that as well. Drops mic.
Is that games news?
That is games news.
What's at the cinema, Steve?
Well, this was last week, rather.
Get it right.
I'll do that again, shall I? Last week, there were 3 major film releases, one of which you've already mentioned, Phil, which was The Interview, which obviously was getting shunted out onto the UK cinema screens, even though it's already available to watch for free on Netflix if you can access it in the US, which I did, and it's rubbish. Don't bother seeing it. Review is up, though, if you want to read that in more detail, but the short version is it's crap. The other films that opened up were Jupiter Ascending, which is the new film from the Wachowski siblings. And this was supposed to open last summer and got pushed back to February. Never a good sign. When a studio does that, it's never a good sign. So I need a bit more time for post-production, a bit more time for effects. Yeah, no, it was obviously not doing very well in test screenings, and they panicked and got it the hell out of the summer release schedule. And I can see why, having now seen it. It's for want of a better word, batshit crazy. Basically, if you just imagine taking Star Wars and the Chronicles of Riddick and Dune and Serenity or Firefly, shoving it all together and then dropping acid, that's kind of what watching this film is like. It's just bonkers. There's more exposition than you can shake a stick at. I know they're meant to be creating a large universe for a franchise of movies. After spending 170 million on this turkey, and it takes 19 million in the US at the weekend, there ain't going to be any more, I can tell you that. In fact, think the Wachowski be lucky if they ever get to make another film again with a budget bigger than about £10.50, because it's just mad as a hatter. It's got Channing Tatum, who I quite like, actually. I think he's a very charming bloke, and he's all right. He's playing this sort of bounty hunter guy who's part dog. Apparently, being part dog means you've got little pointy ears like an elf and a ginger beard, and some fangs too. But it's just ridiculous. And this girl played by Mila Kunis, who is the voice of Meg in Family Guy, but is actually really hot in real life. Turns out to be she's a Russian immigrant who finds out she owns the earth. I'm not making any of this up. And they've got Eddie Redmayne, who must have been so glad the film opened up after the ballots closed at the BAFTAs and the Oscars, because he looks like, I have to quote Mark Kermode, he looked like he spent his life he looked like he spent his entire life being filleted by life. He's just got this look on his face. He sort of either whispers words or screams them. It's without doubt one of the worst performances I think I've ever seen from anyone.
You know what, Steve? I'm dying to see this now.
There's a whole bit. There's a bit where they have to go to a bureaucratic planet, and they're going, I don't want to go there. I'd rather fight a war
than
than
this
go
sounds
to
like
space.
the prequels.
And basically, it's pure Gilliam. It's basically people queuing up and being sent from one department to the next. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, when did this turn into a Terry Gilliam film? It is mad as a hatter. What can I say? Dialogue is trite and terrible. The effects, in fairness, are quite. Production design-wise, it looks gorgeous. I mean, you can see where the money went. There's no question about that. Looked incredible. Sean Bean's in it, and he's the best thing in it by miles. And I think he's part B. So there you go. And
clues in the name.
He collects bees. He's an apiary, isn't it? And he goes, "Oh, bees never lie." It's like what?
They don't.
It's brilliant. I mean, I was just sitting there in the cinema thinking, like, who greenlit this? They must have been so off their nuts on cocaine when this one went past the pitch meeting, because it just doesn't make a lick of sense. Anyway, so that was, I mean, I'll give it credit. It's fun in a sort of bad it's good way. But it's just all over the shop.
But Steve, if you were being dragged to the cinema this weekend, you'd rather go and see batshit crazy Jupiter Ascending than 50 Shades of Grey, would you not?
Yes, I will go and see 50 Shades of Grey, because I'm a professional and dedicated to the site.
And yet the One Direction movie still goes unreviewed.
yeah, Jupiter Ascending. So that was the first film I saw, and I thought, okay, fair enough. And then I nipped into the other cinema next door to watch Selma, which I have to say was absolutely fantastic. It was a breath of fresh air after the madness of Jupiter Ascending to see, a proper film about real subjects and real people. But yeah, it's I'm amazed actually that it's been, when was he 68? He was assassinated, isn't it? So what's that? 47 years? Yeah, it's been nearly 47 years before Hollywood get around to making a film about Martin Luther King Jr. This is that film. Selma was basically what they've done is rather than trying to cover his entire life in a single movie, they've taken a short period of his life, which is basically the Selma marches, and covered that. And so the film starts with him receiving the Nobel Prize in '64 and goes through to the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in '65. And it's it's a really good movie. It's really tightly constructed and written. They use actual FBI wiretap and surveillance logbook entries to use as transitions from one scene to the next. Because they're covering a short period, they've got a lot of real events going on in there. It's quite action-packed, actually, surprisingly, for this kind of film. But there's a lot going on between King, who isn't portrayed as a saint, I have to say, in the film. He goes to Selma knowing what he wants is for the authorities to react. He wants them to beat people up on the streets because he wants the cameras there so the rest of the country can see what's happening. So he's fairly cynical in that sense. Also, they do briefly touch on the fact he was having lots of affairs behind his wife's back. But he's got meetings with him and Lyndon Johnson, and the only complaint about the film would be that Lyndon Johnson is portrayed as being very difficult about, he's always got, basically he's kind of blocking the narrative momentum by trying to stop King from doing certain things. But in actual fact, I think Lyndon Johnson was probably one of the biggest proponents of civil rights that America ever had, and his administration did more than anybody to get this legislation through. But obviously, you need some sort of dramatic content, sort of conflict in it, and Lyndon Johnson rise. And then he's played with Tom Wilkinson. You've got Tim Roth, who's playing George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, who's great in it as well, and David Oyelowo, who's also English. So and his wife, the actress playing Martin Luther King's wife, is also. So basically, the four main roles are British actors. I'm guessing there are some American actors they could have hired. I don't know why everyone in it's English, but that's the way it goes. But it's a really good movie. It's well directed by an African American woman, which is incredibly rare for directors these days. Female directors are rare enough, but an African American woman, I think she's the only one I could think of. But it's nice to see someone other than Spike Lee or Oliver Stone doing it. And, the film's, as I said, tightly structured, beautifully acted, really, really brilliant performance from the lead, who really embodies Martin Luther King. You almost forget it's an actor sometimes. It's a great performance, full of good performances, in fact. Very doesn't shy away from the brutality of what happens on these marches, and some of the racial violence is quite shocking at times. But it gives it a sense of veracity and immediacy that makes it, it really takes you straight back to the 60s. And it also reminds you that in my lifetime, people couldn't vote or being stopped from voting didn't. People being segregated in the United States. You realise that racism is endemic within US society, and it always has been. And I think it's a powerful and moving film, and I'd recommend seeing it highly.
Okay,
highly recommend seeing it.
Yeah.
Thanks,
okay.
Yoda.
That was some Yoda syntax there, wasn't it? It really was.
We've already touched on 50 Shades of Grey opening on Friday. The other one's Two Night Stand. Is it Valentine's weekend by any chance?
Yeah, take a wild guess. I will be going to see 50 Shades of Grey, as you pointed out, Phil. I'm not really that keen because it's obviously based upon a book that was popular with women and not so much with men. I'm going to drag my girlfriend along so that she can at least give a female perspective on the film.
Just wait for the Lego version.
It's going to be better.
And what's this Two Night Stand thing?
Oh, it's a comedy where Miles Teller, who was the lead in Whiplash, quite a good and young up-and-coming actor, I have to say, is a comedy where he sort of has a one-night stand with a girl and then they get snowed in together. So what becomes a one-night stand becomes a two-night stand, and they have to sort of hang out together when really they just wanted to get apart and go home and forget about it. So that's what that's about. So a rom-com. So as you pointed out, Phil, because it's Valentine's Day this weekend. The other film available I didn't get a chance to see, but apparently really, really good, is Shaun the Sheep, an animation film.
Well, see, that's the one I'd go and see.
Well,
because it's Valentine's again.
Yeah, it opened last week, Mark, for the record.
Is it a full movie?
Yeah, no, it's like 85 minutes, but apparently it's almost entirely silent. It's no real dialogue.
It's been getting some pretty good reviews, actually.
It's supposed to be really good, really clever, really funny. Back to their best, to be honest.
And why haven't you gone to see it, Steve?
Well, I can only fit so many films in one day, Phil.
You lie.
I wasn't sure it really fitted our demographic.
We're all interested.
I think, yeah. Get along and get reviewed. Right, moving on to Blu-rays. What's coming up next week?
There is the latest version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, good.
Which I'm mainly reviewing because it's got Dolby Atmos soundtrack and Aero and Hinton.
One way to guarantee disc sales to enthusiasts: put a Dolby Atmos soundtrack on, even if it's the biggest pile of shit ever.
I got 3 Atmos films so far: Transformers, Expendables 3, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That tells you all you need to know. Luckily, this week I'm also getting John Wick. Thank God I'm going to get a half-decent film to watch in Atmos. Also coming out next week, and will be a competition prize by the time you listen to this podcast, is the Babadook, which is an Aussie horror film that has been. Well, I missed last year. I wanted to see it cinema, but it just wasn't playing anywhere near me. But it looks absolutely superb. It's had very, very good reviews, and I'm really looking forward to checking that one out. We've also got season 4 of Game of Thrones, so just to sort of whet our appetites before season 5 starts in the beginning of April. We've got season 4 of Game of Thrones. Now, I wouldn't normally recommend buying TV shows on Blu-ray because you can watch them on Netflix or other streaming services very easily these days, and it generally tends to be a lot more cost effective. But Game of Thrones has got production values that would equal most movies these days, and it's one of the few series that looks absolutely stellar on Blu-ray, so I am buying that on Blu-ray next week. And the other films coming out next week, which a review of which will already be up by the time you listen to this, reviewed by Chris, is Rabid, which is the David Cronenberg movie, his second film from 1977, starring ex-porn star Marilyn Chambers. And you can imagine what to expect from a Cronenberg movie: body horror, violence, sex. So it sounds good.
Before we go into our main movie subject for this podcast, Steve, the BAFTAs happened at the time of recording this podcast last night. Any surprises there? I mean, we don't need the full rundown because...
No. Yes, no real surprises in the actor honours. Eddie Redmayne won for playing Stephen Hawking in A Theory of Everything. And Julianne Moore won for Still Alice, where she plays a woman with Alzheimer's. Whiplash, J.K. Simmons picked up the award for Best Supporting Actor for Whiplash. Absolutely, definitely guaranteed to get the Oscar, I think, now. And Patricia Arquette won for Best Supporting Actress for Boyhood. Boyhood was the big surprise, really. It won Best Film and Best Director. And I think given that Birdman had won Best Director only that weekend in the States, everyone was expecting Alejandro Inarritu to win. But no, Richard Linklater won for Boyhood. Best Film for Boyhood as well. Again, not a bit of a surprise. It had been a front runner, but it kind of lost steam over the last couple of weeks. And I think this now puts it back in the front for a possible victory at the Oscars. I think Boyhood was a great film, so personally I'm pleased with that. I think it's a daring and courageous movie that you'll never ever see the like of it again, and for that reason alone, it's worthy of some sort of recognition. But those were the big winners over last night. Last night as a point of recording this on Sunday night, I suppose.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to move on to a thread which is running in the movies area. So, who is the scariest movie villain in your opinion? And I'm going to go to Mark Botwright first.
You know what? I think someone mentioned one that I definitely agree with. Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Just because it's kind of that idea of fighting against an institution. It's what she represents that makes her all the scarier. But in kind of classic style, perhaps go back to the original Terminator, because it was such a kind of dark film, and there was this sense of kind of brooding and foreboding, like it was a character that was chasing you throughout the whole film. It never felt, it always felt kind of claustrophobic. It always felt like it was a chase movie, like escape was impossible. What
a lot of people forget as well is that we were still in the middle of the Cold War when that came out, and you had all that emphasis on it as well. The end of the world, and this enemy that's after you is going to chase you down and defeat you. And I think if you see it now, it doesn't have the same impact as it did back in '84.
No, it feels very tense. It definitely feels like it's kind of a film as much about the Terminator as it's about kind of the nuclear apocalypse that was going to come as well. They weren't just kind of running away from the Terminator. It's what he kind of symbolized, and lots of kind of dark night shots. It was very much, very, very kind of foreboding. Good villain.
Yeah, good choice. Excellent. So let's go to Hodge.
I don't really get scared by movies very much, but I think there was one when I was younger, and it actually, coincidentally, it ties in with the BAFTAs. I didn't realise. It's Magic with Dickie Attenborough was in, and it's the ventriloquist dummy. And I think this came out in 1978, and I reckon I probably saw it probably the year after. So I was 9, and I was terrified for nights about that. I find something creepy about dolls and stuff. I find that really works on me. Sort of.
What did you make a Child's Play then?
Sorry.
Child's Play.
Oh yeah, I can't remember. That would have creeped me out as well. Anything like that. Yeah,
It was Anthony Hopkins, wasn't it? He was the ventriloquist, and the doll was made to look obviously like him.
Yeah,
and his name in the film, just for a bit of triv, his name was Corky Withers.
Oh really?
Yeah.
There you go. I'll start calling you Corky from now on.
Bill. Corky,
yeah, that genuinely gave me the willies. But other than that, I don't really find all this Freddy Krueger. It's just laughable. All this kind of stuff never scared me. Any of that. Oh, Jaws as well, I guess, from the Bond movies. He scared me when I was a kid.
Oh, I thought you meant the shark.
Yeah, I was going to say
no, not the shark.
Class as a villain.
But yeah, I mean, but the shark was a villain, and if that had any effect on a generation, it was the shark that stopped people going in the water. And it gave sharks a really bad name, didn't it? So, yeah. I'm struggling to think of one for myself, so I'm going to think a little bit longer. Withers?
As a kid, easily for me, the scariest villain was the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which I thought was really scary. As an adult, I reckon definitely Don Logan, Ben Kingsley in Sexy Beast. He was pretty scary. You wouldn't want to meet him at Dark Alley.
Mr. Selley?
Kathy Bates in Misery. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's confliction about, obviously sent over the edge and all sorts of other things, but nonetheless, that very few redeeming features. And then, because, as I say, with Jaws the shark, it's there's an ambiguity. It's a wild animal. I always felt that the alien queen, or just as it is, the alien in Alien, there's it's an unhealthy combination of it being an animal, but a really kind of clever one. And I've always thought it was perfectly villainous and very shiny.
Yeah, there's a certain malevolence to the alien queen, isn't there? Rather than just being an efficient killer like the alien. Yeah,
but it's still just enough animal to it's there's no element of reasoning with it. Again, going, I suppose, there's a similar essence with the Terminator. It's a good call there, but his 80s hair sort of takes the edge off that a bit, whereas the alien has dated rather splendidly, it must be said.
You see, I guess because of my previous life, I've met some really scary people in real life. So to get movie villains that even come close to that, because there's always that disconnect, but. And I can't remember the guy's name whatsoever, but it was No Country for Old Men.
Oh, you mean Javier Bardem?
He absolutely
Anton
Chigurh.
He absolutely nails that. I know that guy in real life. I've met him. I've stood in the same room. Bloody scary.
Did he have luxuriant hair?
Not quite, but yeah. As soon as I saw that fit, I knew him. Scary.
It's the sociopathic kind of.
Oh yeah,
vibe.
It's that you just don't know what he's going to do next, and he has no sense of right or wrong. He has no feelings whatsoever. He will do what he wants to do. And
there are some
to hell with you.
There are some films that kind of based on true stories that tend to have that. I remember when I was young watching. Anyone ever seen 10 Rillington Place?
Yeah.
John Christie, Richard.
Yeah,
Attenborough.
My wife is related to him.
What, the real John Christie?
Yeah. It was
Sleep tight.
It was Christie Halliday, which is my mother-in-law did a whole family tree, and this was the big finding out of it. Yeah, so something like
related to a serial killer.
No, I'm not directly.
Well, not you, yeah, but you.
Yeah, but my wife is. So yeah, I sleep downstairs sometimes. And he'd take a bath when I'm alone.
I mean, if we're talking about being scared, I think the only time the one that gave me nightmares for months afterwards, because I was a kid when I saw it and I shouldn't have seen it, parents went out to the supermarket, and I shoved the video cassette in and started watching it, and that was American Werewolf in London. I know it's not really a bad guy, but if it was anything that actually scared the living daylights out of me, it was that film. And
the effects were amazing.
It wasn't necessarily the monster werewolf either. It was the dream sequences that just. Oof.
Someone's mentioned on Thread, but good point, which is Frank from Blue Velvet, Dennis Hopper. Hopper, I think, probably was a scary man in real life. He's pretty scary in Blue Velvet.
Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man.
Oh, and I'll tell you who I'd go for as well, as being very unnerving and frightening, is Brian Cox as the original Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter.
Yeah.
Very unnerving performance. Like, he never... Just the only colour in that entire cell is, his pallid skin, and even that's not got much colour to it. It just looks like he would kill you without second thought, and is always one step ahead of you. And I also thought that Philip Seymour Hoffman made quite a good villain in Mission Impossible 3, because of the way it was structured. He starts off with him shooting Tom Cruise's wife in the head. You kind of think from that moment on, this villain means business, and you can't, it's going to be bad. And I kind of like that idea of villains who don't monologue, don't muck about. They just do it, and therefore, you're always on edge.
Yeah, I'm obliged. My wife has just handed me a small piece of paper and is obliged to point out Pennywise the Clown.
Yes.
That's her.
Clowns generally, to be perfectly honest, are pretty scary.
Well, I've never stuck my arm down a drain since watching that.
It's more a case that clowns have really been destroyed by Hollywood.
Because that's where he lived. He lived in the drains. Sorry, Ed, we completely...
Clowns have been destroyed by Hollywood. I mean, the latest iteration of American Horror Story with Twisty the Clown.
Freak show.
Yeah. And the American Society of Clowns basically sent an open letter going, "Come on, we have already been basically vilified out of existence. Could you just let up now, please?" It must be said, a Twisty the Clown Halloween costume is going to go great guns next year. It's just phenomenal. But yeah,
off topic, but is Freak Show any good? Because I haven't seen it yet.
Thanks to a 2-foot-tall individual with some irregular sleep patterns, it's kind of fallen out of favour here. But it was going pretty well. We just sort of had too many episodes left over. Fox or FX, whatever the bloody hell they're calling it this week.
Right. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just actually one from yesterday. I also remember because I watched it because I saw it was on Sky On Demand. Whatever the hell his amazing Afrikaans name is, Joss Ackland's character in Lethal Weapon 2. What an absolutely free of any form of remorse human being that is. I mean, so caricature of in a way, but still nonetheless absolutely unmoved by anything.
And he gave the world a chance to go diplomatic immunity.
Yes, absolutely. So he's the gift that keeps on giving. But yeah, I was quite unusually ruthless in terms of those sort of 80s films, in my probably worthless opinion.
Back in the good old days when after the Nazis it was the Afrikaan, and the apartheid supporting South Africans, and then it became the British or the English rather as a go-to villain in Hollywood.
Well, we are properly evil.
Yeah, we do it right.
But not English,
and we all drive Jaguars.
It's good to be bad.
Yeah,
it's got to be British as German, like Hans Gruber.
Well, that's another option. Yes, right after that brief resurrection
diversion.
Right,
okay.
Back to finishing this. Yeah, let's get back to that. So that's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Guns. Lots of guns.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Find them and destroy them.
Mark Botwright.
Why do my eyes hurt?
And Ed Selley.
You're empty.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and video. Plus, you can leave us a rating on iTunes. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.